I'm going to describe some new features to a program that I wrote called NeuroExperimenter. This program is free. You can find it at my website and download it from there. The program runs under Windows. The program interfaces with a hardware headset produced by a company called NeuroSky. You can find more information about the MindWave headset at this link. It's relatively inexpensive, about $95. It's sold on Amazon. You can read reviews there. My software has an extensive user's guide. You can find a link also at my website. I ask that you refer to that if you have any questions or want more detail. I made a previous YouTube video describing this software. You can consult that at this URL. To demonstrate the new features of this program, I'm going to describe an experiment I did with a friend of mine, Sally. Sally is an experienced meditator of some 20 years and has a daily meditation practice. What I wanted to do was see if I could determine the difference in mind state between what I'll call a baseline mind state, normal activity, versus a meditation mind state. And I want to see if the headset can characterize these two mind states by the data that it collects. So to set this up, I decided that the baseline would be 17 minutes. The total session would be 35 minutes, which means that about 18 minutes will be Sally meditating. And for the first 17 minutes, what she did was to surf the internet, read a book, have a snack, just normal things you might do without particularly trying to do anything. And then for the next part of the session, a chime would ring after the first 17 minutes, and then Sally started to meditate, and she spent 18 minutes at that. Before we started the session, we picked a place to store the log, and you can see that we can run the log through the program many times to see what the data shows us. So we selected the headset as the source of the data, put the headset on to Sally, and did the connect. Sally surfed the internet and read a book for 17 minutes. A chime rang. Then she started to meditate for the remainder of the session. Now I'm going to pass the log through the software at a high speed, 25 times its normal speed, to show you the reports that you can get at the end of the session. Here's the graph page, and we're looking at what is called the summary report. This report shows ratios of the performance versus the baseline for each frequency. The idea here is that, for example, you'll see that gamma 1 and gamma 2 are almost twice as strong during the performance part of the session, that is the last half or the meditation part of the session, than they were for the baseline part of the session, the first half. Likewise, the delta frequency was about half during the performance meditation part of the session versus what it was during the baseline part of the session. This suggests that we can characterize meditation versus baseline by coming up with a formula like this. We'll take gamma 1 plus gamma 2 and divide it by delta, so that when either gamma 1 or gamma 2 are high, the whole fraction will be high, and likewise when delta is small, the whole fraction will be small. So let's take a look at that. Here's our formula, gamma 1 plus gamma 2 divided by delta. Gamma 1, gamma 2 being high, the whole formula is high. Delta being small, the whole formula is still high. Let's select as our performance feedback this derived formula. Now we can pass the log through again at a high speed to see how our formula performs, comparing the performance part of the session to the baseline part of the session. It runs faster if I'm not showing the graph. Here's the graph, and as we would expect, the derived ratio of performance over baseline is about 3.5 times during the meditation part of the session as it is during the baseline or normal brain activity. This suggests that our formula is pretty good at discriminating between meditation and baseline, because during meditation the derived formula average is 3.41 times higher than it is during the baseline. Now, a more informative report at the end of the session is this performance report. This shows two box plots, one for the baseline and one for the performance section of the session. A box plot shows the percentage of samples that are between various values. The box includes 50% of all the samples of the formula are between about 1.8 and about 3.5. The upper whisker shows 90% of the samples. 90% of the samples are smaller than about 4.5. Likewise, 90% of the samples for the performance section are above this lower whisker, or above a little over 1. We can see that the baseline samples and the performance samples for the derived formula output are clearly very well separated, as we would hope. The one thing we have to do now is select a cutoff. We want to select a line, a point where we are capturing most of the samples during the performance and excluding most of the samples during baseline. That cutoff, along with our formula, then will be our classifier to determine what is a meditation sample and what is a baseline sample. I selected about 1.8. If we had a cutoff of about 1.8, you could see that we would capture a good deal of the performance samples, and we will be excluding a good deal of the baseline samples. So let me put in that cutoff into our parameters and run the log through the software again. So this is going to be 1.8, and the high value is somewhat arbitrary. I'm going to select 3.5. What this controls is the volume of the tone that's produced during feedback and its frequency. As you approach this high value for the output of the formula, the tone will get louder and will increase in frequency. Let's push our log through again at a high speed using this cutoff to see what we get. And again, I'll go here. And okay, here's our graph, here's our cutoff, and now we can look at these two boxes. This says for the baseline part of our session, only 6% of the samples passed. In other words, only 6% of the baseline samples were above this. So we are misclassifying in some sense 6% of the baseline samples as meditation. 73% of the performance samples are being classified as meditation. In other words, the derived formula output for the portion of our session that we designate as meditation, 73% of the samples are being classified as meditation. Okay, so the next thing to do is to try and train someone in meditation using our formula and using our cutoff. So let's see how you might do that. The next step is to use the system to train someone in meditation. So how would you do that? Well, I've changed the formula a little bit. I've taken the average over the last 5 samples instead of just taking the last sample. This will smooth the audio feedback and make it less erratic. This is just a matter of taste. You might like more real-time feedback, and so you could either reduce this to something like 2 or 3 or just take the average out altogether. We retain our minimum and our high grading limits that we discovered during the last session. And what we would do is we would pick headset data as the source of our data, and we would pick a different log file so that we could retain the information and process it many times. And what I'm going to do now is replay the log quickly so we can get to the second half of the session, and then we're going to pretend like we're doing this in real time instead of just replaying the log. Probably what you want to do is set the baseline length to 0. You're not particularly interested in measuring a baseline at this point, and you might want to reduce the session length to, say, 20 minutes, which might well be long enough to practice meditation. So let me get through the first part of the log quickly. And let's see here. Well, now we're 34 minutes into the session, so we don't have much time left. So let me go back and redo this. And this time I'll stop it more quickly. Okay, now we're in the second half of the session, so I'm going to go back and change this replay speed to normal speed, and I'm going to turn the audio on. And as I say, let's pretend that we have a headset connected to a subject, and we're doing this in real time. So we would connect with the headset on the person's head, having selected this headset data, and here we go. Now you can get back as feedback, you can get the last 5 seconds, and you're more interested in what you're trying to perform, which is the derived waveform. And you'll get audio feedback as soon as this rises above the minimum that we've set, which is, if I remember right, 1.8. Now you don't have to look at just the derived waveform. You can look at any of the waveforms that you like, so that you could look at the gamma, say. Now you can hear the audio. It goes off, but unless you're above this. And the more that you are above the minimum, the louder the audio feedback will get, and its frequency will also increase. Now, instead of looking at the last 5 seconds, you can just look at the last sample, and again, whatever waveforms you're interested in. And what you're trying to do is make this derived waveform as tall as you can, specifically above the minimum. It's not terribly useful, however, with something like meditation to use a visual feedback. Probably you just want to listen to the audio feedback and pay attention to that. Now let's assume that you're done with the session and that you're at the end. So what you would do at that point, let me speed this up again. Okay, so here we are at the end of the session, and what you want to do is look at the final report for performance. And we've altered the formula to take the average, and so we've actually improved the discrimination powers of this formula and the minimum. And now the baseline, in Sally's session, only 1% of the baseline samples would be classified as meditation, and 82% would be classified as meditation. So if you're trying to train yourself, at the end of the session, you look at this percentage that passed, and you might keep track of that and see if you're improving. Now, I've used this system to try and determine the difference in waveforms produced by your brain in different aspects, such as reading a book versus relaxing, or reading a book versus solving chess problems, or, say, relaxing versus watching TV. In the manner that I've just shown, you can compare any two of these mind states, try and figure out a formula, and try and figure out a classifier. Now, I should say at the end here that as far as meditation is concerned, Sally points out that you can't measure the depth of your own meditation simply by looking at the waveforms that your brain is producing. There's more to it than that. You can read her comments in the user's guide. Nevertheless, I think you can have fun with this software, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for your attention.